Will be on the chamber website in case people miss it. So as you come in, please mute yourself and turn off your video. We are going to have a presentation, then a panel discussion, and then Q&A. So right now, let me introduce you to John Flood. John is an attorney who founded Flood Marcavage Law in May 2020. Prior to starting the firm, John was a shareholder for several years at a leading international labor and employment law firm in Washington, D.C., and he started his legal career by serving as an Air Force JAG officer. John is a trial lawyer, and he loves to be in the courtroom. John also loves helping clients figure out difficult problems and partnering with them to find creative solutions. John is also passionate about community service, and in particular, helping to provide cross-cultural exchange opportunities for youth baseball players between the U.S. and Japan. So those of you just joining us, please turn off your video and mute yourself for our presentation, and I will turn it over to John.
Margie, thank you very much. We're thrilled to partner with you and the Rockville Chamber of Commerce to talk about today this very important issue of whether employers should require their employees to receive the COVID-19 vaccine. And to all of our guests who are here and will be joining us, thank you for taking time out of your day. And we hope this discussion today over the next hour will be very helpful to you in wrestling with this issue. Employers, HR professionals, lawyers, and leaders within companies, we've all been dealing with pandemic-related issues. We're coming up, I guess, right on the 1-year point. I think I'll just say the word for everyone because I'm sure it fits for everyone or most everyone. I think we're all exhausted. But we got to keep pressing on because the tough decisions continue, and those have to be made in relation to the workforce, your teams, and safety in the workplace. The decision of whether to require employees to receive the COVID-19 vaccine, and if so, how to deal with those who may refuse to do so, I think is going to be a very difficult decision. And I think in part because of the timing, because as the vaccine's being rolled out and just given sort of how the virus seems to be trending now, my thought is that this is intersecting with a lot of companies and employers who are also having a lot of their employees physically come back into the workplace. Either they've just done that, they are doing it now, or they will be looking to do that in the near future. It's not an easy decision. I want to just show you real briefly about 5 different headlines. Let's go to slide 4. And in the spirit of self-deprecation, I want to just focus on the legal industry. And real quick, I think most lawyers, a recurring nightmare is that we wake up at 2 a.m. and dread, oh, did I have a brief due last night, at close of business, and did I miss it? Or it's like maybe when we were in school, miss it, the fear or the dream of, did I miss a homework assignment or did I miss a test? And the answer is usually no, of course, thankfully. But the consideration here may be, some may be thinking, am I late to consider this issue? Am I behind the curve? And I think these headlines will help show you, no, you're not. The first slide, it's drawn from an article December 18th. And look at the headline, firms, courts face worker vaccine buying despite EEOC guidance. And I pulled out, highlighted the key quote I wanted you to take a look at, that law firms and court systems, they're struggling with what to do for their own employees. Let's look at slide 5 now. About 30 days later, another article from, and this is Law 360, it's a leading news publication within the legal industry. And this is about 30 days later, January 21st. Can we go back? Slide 5. I highlighted the part of the quote from the article that talks about this issue is at the top of the mind for law firm leaders right now. And of course, it's heartening, or maybe not so heartening, to see that law firm leaders, it appears, what are they doing? They're waiting to see what peers do before making a move, before making a decision. That hesitation, I think, to reach out, to step out and make this type of decision is pretty natural, I think. Slide 6. Just a few days later, this article is highlighting what one of the top 100 law firms in the country, Davis Wright Tremaine, has announced as their policy. According to the article, their policy, they're going to encourage their employees to get a COVID-19 vaccine once they're eligible to get it, but then they'll only allow those who have done so to work in the office or to attend firm-sponsored events. So when I read that, it's a little bit of a head scratcher for me, because on the one hand, they use the term they're encouraging employees to do it, which sounds, collaborative, and well, we just want you to do this because we think it would be best for you and everyone else. And then on the other hand, they've got a little bit of a velvet glove, so to speak, where, well, if you don't do that, here are the consequences. And in this case, we're not going to let you come back to work physically, and you're not going to be able to attend firm-sponsored events. I think this kind of typifies it. One, it's an approach some employers may take to this issue. Two, I think it really illustrates the difficulty of navigating this issue for employers. Slide 7, please. Everyone's thinking about it, and this is in the legal industry, but I think this applies more broadly to employers in all kinds of industries. And then I highlighted further from the article, many are getting pressure from staff to have a response or answer. I think if you all have not gotten an email or call or question about this issue yet, it probably will be there soon, because I don't think we're late. You're late in dealing with the issue if you haven't really considered it and addressed it yet, but I think that it's imminent in terms of having to deal with it. And let's look at slide 8. And I wanted to pull this out from the article. It's again about Davis Wright, because it just kind of, to me, in a little bit of a humorous way, notes that, okay, under their policy, where are all the difficult questions going to be directed? Of course, first to HR. And if you work in HR, you know that. The same could be said, I'm sure, for in-house counsel with larger companies. And then if it's a smaller company, your HR department, or, one of the executive leaders will probably be facing these questions any day now. I just think these headlines show just how difficult this decision can be. And that's the reason we wanted to have this discussion with you, to help you think about these issues, think about factors that are critical to consider as you weigh these issues, and provide an opportunity to hear some expert input on the issue. If we could go to slide 2. Our panel today, 2 people who I think will be really well suited to help give some expert input on this issue. First is my partner, Anthony Marcavage. Anthony and I, we worked together at the law firm I used to work at. He was there a little more than 10 years ago. He then went to an in-house position as the top labor and employment lawyer with Bon Secours Mercy Health System, a large multi-state hospital system. And while there, Anthony handled sort of the full range of labor and employment law issues, conducted company-wide training, advised the company and leadership regarding policies and the most difficult employment decisions, and he litigated a lot of lawsuits. Anthony's work also included working with our next and special guest, Liana Orsolini. Liana provides a very different perspective than Anthony and I can provide to you, because she comes from the nursing background. Liana is currently Vice President of Nursing Services for Armor Correctional Health, Inc. She also has her own consulting business focused in the healthcare industry, Orsolini and Associates. And for about 6 years, Liana worked as the senior program manager for clinical transformation and advanced practice with Bon Secours Mercy Health System. Liana has a bachelor's and master's degrees in nursing and a PhD from the University of California, San Francisco in nursing workforce. The nexus between Liana and Anthony on this issue in particular is that they both co-chaired and worked together while at Bon Secours on their vaccine committee. And I'm sure they'll describe some of their work along the way as we discuss things today. I can't think of two better people to help guide our discussion and give some very specific expert thought and advice to this issue than Anthony and Liana. And Anthony, I'm happy to turn it over to you now.
Okay, so I'll be manning the slides for the next 15 minutes or so you can probably just expand my screen so you can see the full slideshow. So we're going to start. A good place to start is always on what the EEOC is saying about an issue, because of course they would be the body that was first looking at your policy and procedures and handling that first stage of employee complaints. And the EEOC mercifully released guidance on this just in time on December 16, 2020 on exactly this issue, whether employers can mandate the COVID-19 vaccine. And the EEOC confirmed what we all knew leading up to it, is that employers generally can mandate vaccinations for employees. However, the EEOC reminded us that like any employer policy, the mandates must account for the employee's rights under the various employment laws, Title VII, the ADA, in this case, the Genetic Information Non-Disclosure Act. We are going to focus on Title VII and the ADA today. So first off, Title VII. This intersects with the issue of vaccines generally in the area of religious accommodations. Now, I'm sure those of you who handle these issues regularly know employers must accommodate sincerely held religious beliefs unless they create an undue hardship for the employer. Right? So if an employee comes forward, they have a sincerely held religious belief, they need some sort of accommodation, the employer is obligated to accommodate that all the way up to the point where it creates an undue hardship. We'll talk about what that means in a second. Now, very importantly, a religious belief can be personal or highly unusual, right? It could be bizarre. They could be the only person on the planet, right, who holds that sincerely held belief. But if it is a religious belief and if it is sincerely held, the employee is entitled to the protections under Title VII. What can the employer do if you get such a idiosyncratic religious belief? Well, you can ask for details to better understand and validate that the belief is sincerely held. But what you cannot do is evaluate the validity of the belief. Right? As I said, it could be very much off the wall, but if it's sincerely held and it's religious in nature, then the employee is entitled to the protection. Religious accommodations. Here's an example, something Liana and I dealt with this sort of request. An employee comes forward and cites, 1 Corinthians 6:19. It's the passage where Paul talks about, the body being a temple. I can't put a vaccine into it. My body's a temple, period. Hard stop, right? Corinthians 6:19 was time when we were enforcing our flu vaccination program. It became a very popular Bible verse. So can the employer challenge this? Well, yes, but really only. Right? The employer can investigate whether the employee is being consistent, right? Whether the employee, for instance, maybe received a vaccine last year in the case of the yearly flu vaccine and what will probably end up being the yearly COVID vaccine. And the employer can evaluate whether there's a reasonable basis to think that the employee has fabricated the belief. So, for instance, they post on Facebook and say, I'm going to make up a religious excuse to not get the vaccine, right? I mean, if there's something that evident, then of course the employer can go and deny the accommodation, even though it's a religious request. Now, depending on the size of your workforce, though, right, and your resources, and this will be a theme I'll be talking about throughout, you really have to ask yourself, is it worth diving into employees' sincerely held religious beliefs? If someone comes forward with a sincerely held belief, no matter what it might be, a lot of employers are just going to accept it and move on, right? They aren't going to start digging into whether the employee is consistent or the nature of that belief, or if it's actually religious or whatever. And that's really a question for you based on your interest in the issue and what sort of resources you can bring to bear in administering your vaccination program. But I think in our experience, if the employee, we didn't let the perfect be the enemy of the good. If the employee brought forward the belief and it was on its face plausible, we just moved on. So undue hardship, when can you say no? Well, employers can deny accommodations that create an undue hardship. And in the religious context, that is actually a very low bar for the employer to meet. Any accommodation that exceeds a de minimis cost can be denied. All right. And very importantly, in the context of vaccinations, a de minimis cost can be economic or non-economic. Right? And when we think about non-economic costs, it could be, safety, things like that. So depending on the type of work and working conditions, the employer may have an excellent argument, especially in the vaccination context, that there is a non-economic undue hardship or a downstream economic undue hardship. So an example, a grocery store cashier refuses to take the vaccine based on religious beliefs. I think in that case, the employer is going to have a strong argument to say the potential exposure of coworkers and customers is a undue hardship, and we simply cannot accommodate that request. However, the same argument, of course, would not exist for someone who is working from home and rarely interacts with coworkers. All right, moving from religion to the ADA, which is a little bit more complicated. So employees may seek exemptions from vaccine requirements as reasonable accommodations for disabilities. And as any of you who have dealt with the ADA knows, this is the term disability is an extremely broad, inclusive term, right? It's a different term than, say, Social Security disability or long-term disability programs employers may have. The definition of disability under the ADA is very broad. So once again, the employer can deny an accommodation if it would pose an undue hardship or a direct threat. However, unlike under Title VII, the bar for an employer is much higher, right? It is not a de minimis standard. Rather, it is an intensive case-by-case analysis based on the resources of the employer, right? So if you are a large employer, your bar is going to be higher than a smaller employer as far as ADA undue hardship. I should note, I don't think anyone has noted, if you have questions, please enter them into the chat. John will be fielding them and he will interrupt me and let me know if you have a question. We hope to receive questions now and then later during the panel part of the discussion, but feel free to put them in the chat. So the other opportunity to deny the accommodation is in the under the legal term of our direct threat, right? Significant risk of substantial harm to the health or safety of the individual or others that cannot be eliminated or reduced by reasonable accommodation. Again, depending on the type of work you do, the proximity of employees to each other, the proximity of employees to clients, your ability to replace workers, your kind of staffing situation, employers might have an opportunity to make the direct threat argument in the context of vaccinations for obvious reasons, right? I mean, if you come in and you infect your employees, that is clearly a direct threat. However, very important under the ADA and under Title VII is that you must consider alternative accommodations. Right? If you decide that exempting someone from the vaccine requirement is a direct threat or is an undue hardship, that doesn't end the inquiry. You need to explore whether there are other accommodations that could meet the employer's goals. And those could be masking, those could be moving into a temporary role, that is, say, at home, or as a last resort, it could be moving the employee to unpaid leave. Another quirk about the ADA and vaccinations is that employees will regularly come in with doctor's notes from their general practitioners, their nurse practitioners, their family medicine doctors, whoever, and just say something like, employee had a bad reaction to a vaccine years ago. Please excuse her from the vaccine. Right, and that you need to make the decision whether you are going to grant the accommodation based on what's really a thinly supported basis by the physician. And actually, and Liana might speak a bit about this, there's actually quite a limited number of scientifically based reasons not to get the vaccines. And often, these family practitioners, I mean, obviously they're not immunologists, they're not, epidemiologists or whatever, they're general practitioners. So there often necessarily isn't a lot of meat in the request to excuse the employee from the vaccine. And just like the religious question, I think it's the same here. How much effort and resources do you want to put into challenging the doctor's note, right? Under the ADA, of course, you can pay for an independent second opinion. If that is contrary to the first opinion, you can then pay for a third, right, to break the tie. Is all of that worth it? Well, that's something that you'll need to evaluate internally. But I think in my experience, employers have, if employees have come forward with a doctor's note, in many cases, even if the note is not all that convincing, they have accepted it and moved on. Once again, not letting the perfect be the enemy of the good here. Accommodations in general, remember always you need to go through the interactive process of back and forth, an exchange of ideas. I always recommend my clients in the vaccination context or in any context, be creative in the interactive process, make sure it's documented. And of course, termination is the ultimate last resort after, you've exhausted all ideas for reasonable accommodations, the employee has exhausted leave, and there's really nothing left but termination. But that should be pretty far down the road. Quickly mandating vaccinations in a unionized workforce. Right? Unless there's a government or credentialing body or client mandate to vaccinate employees, this is probably a matter of CBA interpretation. So, if you are, for instance, a federal contractor and the circumstances change and the government says you must mandate all of your employees, and even though it's not in the CBA, you probably can have a good argument to go to the union and bargain the impact of that, but get it done. Or if you're, a subcontractor working for a client, maybe a hospital or something like that, where, the client says you need to have all your employees vaccinated. Once again, you're gonna have a good argument to mandate that even in a union environment. But absent that sort of third party mandate, it's something that most likely you're going to have to sit down and bargain with the union. And the union, they've been pushing back on, you've seen some of the things in the news with teachers unions. This is an area that is certainly fraught with controversy. If your management rights clause is non-specific, just like in any other case, if it doesn't say the employer can set HR and safety policies, if it's not explicit, then that's going to be a subject of bargaining. Okay. OSHA and the CDC both have encouraged but have not mandated the vaccine. However, it's just good to note that they establish a floor, not a ceiling, for employee health and safety. So as we said at the very beginning, you are welcome to go beyond that. All right. Well, you can do it, right? There's some procedures, there are exceptions, but generally speaking, if you want to mandate the vaccine, you certainly can do it. Should you? In the current environment, right, vaccine mandates are going to generate very strong reactions from your employees, from your clients, your customers, potentially politicians, the local press, the board of directors, unions, both in your facilities and those who would like to be in your facilities, right, might use it as a wedge issue. So there's a lot of controversy, a lot of tension here. And that's why a lot of employers, of course, are going to decide not to do this. But if you're going to do it, what are some of the considerations? Well, is your workforce high risk for COVID transmission between employees or from employees to customers, right, due to the type of work or location? The easiest example, of course, is healthcare. Let's even focus that and look at a nursing home where the COVID deaths and spread have just been incredibly high. A lot of those employers are going to mandate the vaccines. Right? The work just justifies the mandation. Is your workforce sensitive to staffing shortages that could be caused by widespread outbreaks among your employees? We think of the meat packing industries, right, from early in the pandemic, where it spread through and they, dozens of employees were out and it impacted the supply chain, right? There was, for a couple weeks, there are shortages of meat. Those employers will likely take a hard look at mandating the vaccine because of staffing issues. Are you at high risk for union organizing? If so, then again, that's something you're going to want to think of. How is that going to play into that dynamic? Are your HR and employee health departments robust enough to manage a vaccination program? Liana and I will talk a bit about what that entails. But if you're very thinly staffed, and many of you are, and you just don't have the resources to put in to doing this right, should you do it at all? Are there alternatives? And then speaking of those alternatives, are there ways to make your workplace safe short of mandating the vaccine, such as masking, staggering shifts, social distancing, and the like? If you do, a couple suggestions. Get full buy-in from your board of directors and consult with your major clients. Right now, if you're in retail, that might be different kettle of fish, but if you have a couple major important clients, probably worth bouncing it off them as well. Attempt to invite employees into the decision-making process in a meaningful way. You could do that through anonymous employee polling, email inbox where employees can send their comments, or I think preferably town hall meetings where you have an employee health expert, someone like Liana, and a senior executive talking about the importance of vaccines and getting employee input. And then finally, make sure you have your vaccination policy and procedures vetted by legal and someone with employee health background to just ensure that everything is up to snuff. All right, we are now going to move. I'm going to stop sharing the screen and we can move into the panel part of the discussion. John, I think you are going to moderate.
Yes, thank you. So first question, what problems are you seeing now in this, Anthony, this could be for you or Liana. What problems are you seeing now with the vaccine rollout and specifically for employers, and what, if any, early lessons are being learned from rolling it out?
Thank you. I'll go ahead and take that one to begin with. Thank you, John and Anthony, for the privilege to be part of this panel. Just a quick response to Anthony about COVID contraindications. The CDC states that the only contraindication is a severe allergic reaction to previous immunizations, and the culprit with a vaccine that has no mercury in it, no preservatives, is the PEG. And because I'm acronym challenged, I'm not even going to try to say what PEG means, but that seems to be the indicator antigen for allergic reactions. So, we have Benadryl, we have all kinds of, we have steroids you can give, personal physician or nurse practitioner or PA can give employees to dampen a potential allergic reaction. And I think that would be a much lower risk than taking the vaccine itself based on all the evidence. So only severe allergic reaction. And we think of anaphylaxis when we hear severe in the medical industry. But the problems I'm seeing right now in our employee vaccination program is this unrealistic expectation that many employees are going to seek out vaccination and not solely your early adopters. So think of a bell-shaped curve, especially with something as, it's not really new technology. We've been using the technology in the COVID vaccine and research for 20 years. It's just a new application. So we're only seeing the head, maybe 20% or less of our employees have started to get the vaccine, and the majority or the people in the bell are going to wait and make sure that the early adopters don't turn into frogs before they go and seek the vaccination. The most response that we're getting is, "I'll wait and see what happens to you." So there's that, and kind of leveling the expectation up the chain of, in our corporate leadership. So also there's a short window of time the vaccine is available, whether it's at a work site or perhaps a pharmacy, because the cold chain the requirements are very complex. So, Pfizer has to be at -94 degrees, and then it has to be brought to room temperature. I know most about Moderna because that's the vaccine we're using in our system. And with Moderna, there's the frozen expiration date, there's the refrigerator expiration date, which is 30 days. Then there's the room temperature expiration date, which is 12 hours. And then once you flip the cap open on the vial, you have a 6-hour window. And then we can't use it anymore because there's no preservatives. So that's a great thing that there's no preservatives. A lot of people that are in the anti-vax category really, really hate the preservatives and feel that that's a real problem with adverse reactions. So, you really have to do really good planning. And when we are ready to pop a vial, we have 10 people waiting and 3 backups just in case there's no-shows, because we cannot waste any of the vaccine. There's several failure points to giving the Moderna vaccine. It says to gently roll the vial, but if you shake it, you neutralize it, and it's opaque. It looks like NPH insulin, and nurses from nursing school have been trained to shake vials with opaque substances in them to make sure you're getting full distribution of the contents in the syringe. So that's been a real education point, and all the failure points if you decide you're going to do an in-house vaccination program. If you don't, you're not going to have to deal with a lot of the logistics around this. Also, I've learned that higher education does not prevent massive ignorance about the safety and benefits of the vaccine. There are people with PhDs that believe in conspiracy theories and do not believe in the science, and really have very low trust in the government or the FDA or whatever. So those are the problems we're seeing right now, front and center.
Liana, thank you very much. So one question that's come in, have you heard any news or maybe seen any instances where employers have been able to, at this point, offer the vaccine sort of like a clinic on site at the work site. I'm assuming maybe not, but have you seen that? Or if not, do you have any idea when that might, the flow of the vaccine in terms of availability might permit that?
Sure. No, there's a couple examples, you know, in my healthcare area, yes, we do on-site vaccinations for our patients, for our employees. But we're really mindful, especially for the second vaccination, to do it the day before they have, or the day that following 2 days off, because we're starting to hear a lot of anecdotal evidence that the second vaccination can give you many more adverse reactions, fatigue, a low-grade fever, and whereas the same people that got that kind of reaction from the second shot didn't get it so much from the first. So, you know, in a healthcare situation, sure. But one of the things that I recommend is make it easy for your employees to get the vaccination. So if you don't have the resources to do an on-site clinic yourself, see if there's someone out there that can come in as a mobile clinic. So, I mean, that's a great possibility. It's for like the Moderna vaccine, you can just bring it in a cooler with a thermometer, make sure it doesn't get over a certain temperature, it doesn't refreeze, and you've got your hour expiration dates, you know, patted down. Make it as easy as possible for people to opt in. So, but I haven't heard of any mobile vaccination clinics yet, probably because most states aren't past phase 1A and B, which is, you know, stratifying the highest risk groups to get the vaccine first. So I don't think we're going to see.
I would add to that, if you're,
yeah.
you know, especially if you're a large employer, right, in a locale, it would be a good time to start reaching out, you know, to your county health department, or if you don't have a county health department, to, you know, the local hospital systems, and just saying, we're interested in mobile vaccination when that opportunity comes. What do we have to do to prepare for that? And hopefully there'll be some, you know, local experts who can guide you on that. But I think, you know, that is a great idea. And Liana, your point is well taken. The easier you make it, the more adoption you're going to have.
Right. And there's also mobile health clinics out there already that have all the infrastructure they need. They have oxygen, they have vital sign equipment machines, they have EpiPens in case of a severe allergic reaction. So a mobile unit that's already going out there to provide care would be an easy transition to a vaccination station.
Liana and Anthony, perhaps both. So I've got two questions I think really flow together. And this really goes to the issue of, you know, an employer considering the do we do this or not question. One, if a company decides not to do that, could it be viewed as not providing a healthy and safe work environment for their employees? And related to that, is it, you know, how do you assess the threat, the risk for employees in a particular work site in terms of the risk of transmission if folks aren't vaccinated, if that's not required?
Well, I'll throw in a couple from the legal side of it. So remember, the CDC and OSHA have not mandated the vaccine. So I think it's going to be hard to argue, you know, liability for not mandating the vaccine when there is, you know, no government or authoritative guidance that says you need to do that. So I think you're okay there. Liana, do you have, you know, any thoughts on that?
You know, if I were an employee and I wasn't in the health field, so I wasn't working as a nurse in a hospital, I was maybe in a grocery store, I wouldn't perceive the grocery store to not care about my health if they didn't offer the vaccine, but I would perceive that they did care about my health if they were willing to give me a couple hours off to go get the vaccine. You know, there are all kinds of carrots an employer can do that doesn't include actually administering the vaccine on site. You know, $5 coffee gift certificate or Amazon gift certificate. I mean, there's all kinds of carrots to encourage getting the vaccine somewhere when it becomes available for your group, your risk group, and that would be perceived, I think, as supporting wellness.
Here's another question, kind of a big picture on this decision. If you were advising a CEO or another corporate leader on whether to require the vaccine, what, if any, key factors would you recommend they look at?
Well, let me throw in one, and then I'll turn it over to Liana. We are now a year into this primarily, right? And hopefully headed in the right direction in terms of transmission, although with the variants and other issues, we may not be, we just don't know yet. But, you probably, if you're an employer, you probably have a fairly good idea of what works to date. You've been through it for a year. If you've been hit hard by this and you see this, with COVID being here to stay, likely, we'll talk about that later potentially as well. But, if this is going to be something that we're dealing with every year now, then potentially, based on your past experience, it is something you want to explore, right? But if up to this point you've weathered it pretty well, and you don't think there's any dramatic changes necessary, in other words, your remote work is flowing pretty well, and there's no pressing need to have everyone back, then I think you can probably anticipate that the future will be similar to the past, if not a little better, and there's no reason to do anything too dramatic.
Yeah, just what I'd like to add is I would not recommend making it mandatory, except perhaps in those situations where you're in a nursing home. But even in other congregate living situations, I haven't heard of it being mandatory. I mean, a couple of years ago, when Anthony and I worked together at Bon Secours Mercy Hospital, we achieved a 97% vaccination rate for flu vaccine across 24,000 employees in several states. So the carrot and the stick works really well. In that situation, the stick was you had to wear a mask, during the winter flu season. If you didn't get the vaccine nowadays, you have to wear a mask anyway. And because of the variants, I think that's going to be the new normal. The early UK variants is susceptible to Moderna and Pfizer vaccines, but the new South Africa, Brazil variants are not. So, then you can drill down into what kind of mask. Well, surgical masks are more effective than cloth masks. And then, N95s are even more effective than surgical masks. So, and then if the variants are 50 to 70% more easy to catch than COVID, and COVID is so much more easy to catch than the flu, then I can see us having to move to goggles if we don't get the vaccination, or maybe we move to goggles anyway because of the variants. I do have a lot of hope that because we're utilizing this new technology very effectively, I mean, they stopped the clinical trial early because people that weren't getting the vaccine were ending up in the hospital and in the ICU versus people who got the vaccine were not. So it was unethical and immoral to continue giving people placebo than it was to give the vaccine. So I have a lot of hope that we were so fast at being to apply this old technology to a new context that we'll be able to catch up to those variant strains. And to Anthony's point, maybe this becomes a yearly type of flu vaccination in the future. So right now, unless there's a variant that takes us to 1910, where 10% of the world population dies, and we're talking millions of people, I don't see us moving very easily to mandatory vaccination when we haven't had to get high compliance with flu vaccine based on best practices.
Liana, kind of tied into that, what are the maybe the 2 or 3 most common employee concerns and maybe objections to getting a vaccine like this? And I'm sure your experience with the flu vaccine, you and Anthony dealt with those routinely, I know.
Well, with the flu vaccine, people were really, I heard over and over again about the preservatives. So we moved to preservative-free vaccine as soon as we could. But because this is a new vaccine, or, you know, new application of an old technology, there's fear of the unknown because there's no preservatives in it. There's not the mercury argument. So fear of the unknown. There's no trials with pregnant or lactating women. So in our system, we just give people a choice. We don't try to coerce them. There's very few diverse volunteers, decreasing minority representation in the trials. And there's a long history of minority populations being distrustful of vaccine trials for good reasons. So that's kind of problematic, even though we have had such great efficacy in the clinical trials. So, and I haven't heard anything that people are afraid of the symptoms, but they really believe it's going to scramble up their DNA. So how I explain it, and this is why an education program, you know, wouldn't make the vaccine mandatory, but what we've done is we've made a 30-minute educational component on HealthStream mandatory. So every employee, whether they decide to take the vaccine or not, have to listen to researchers and the science and the explanation of how this vaccine, yeah, it enters your cells just like a regular cold virus, just like a regular coronavirus, but it does not enter your cell nucleus, just like a regular coronavirus, just like a regular cold virus. I mean, you get sick from a cold pre-COVID because the little strand of RNA called the virus entered your cell and makes your cell make things that make you sick. Well, the RNA, or the little code of communication that goes into your cell that's this virus, tells your cell, don't make the whole virus, just make this one little part that's the crown, this little protein, and then your immune system will react to the protein so that you become immune when the virus enters your body, because it recognized that protein on the outside of the viral cell. So once I explain that to people, it's like, oh, you know, I get it. So the vaccine cannot give you coronavirus because it's not making the whole virus, or even it's not a live attenuated virus like our previous vaccine technology. It's just telling you to make a tiny little protein, and it's just a small component of this virus. So if you get coronavirus, you know, shortly after you get the vaccine, it's because it was already cooking in you, and it takes a couple of weeks for the vaccine to work, just like it does for the flu vaccine. So I think, you know, that is the biggest fear, is the DNA scramble, which it just can't happen. And fear that it might give you COVID. Side effects haven't been that great of an issue because we're setting.
I think Liana, we've got a technical issue. Anthony, while we're waiting for Liana to get back online, here's a question that's come in. So in the you know, contracting world between like a general, prime, and subs, could there be a joint employer issue if the higher level contractor is requiring employees of sub to get the vaccine?
Yes, yeah, definitely. So if there's, you know, let's take the ADA context, for instance. If the prime is mandating the vaccine and does not recognize, and the sub comes back and says, we have some individuals that are seeking religious exemptions or, you know, have disabilities, and the prime doesn't recognize that and says, no, they need to be vaccinated anyway, then absolutely. You're going to have a joint employer issue on that narrow issue. So I think, you know, two things. If you're the prime, respect the sub's HR processes. And, you know, if you're the sub, you're communicating, you're doing the interactive process and communicating the results of that, you know, to the prime so they understand the potential legal liability there.
I'm back.
Welcome back.
Oh, great. Liana, when we touched on an issue that was geared towards Anthony there, a question that's come in, and so you mentioned earlier, I think, sort of your view that of an environment where it may be best to require this sort of, I guess, the healthcare, and in particular like a nursing home setting, due to the risk of the patients. Any thoughts on this issue and the issue of risk of transmission in schools, including down to the preschool level?
Oh, that's a tough one. I mean, in terms of risk of transmission, I think wearing masks and doing better hand hygiene and coughing into your elbow, even with your mask on, maybe even double masking, has really severely decreased the amount of flu transmission. So just having those things in place are gonna take us a long way with COVID transmission. So how do you do it with preschoolers? I have kindergarten teachers, and it's a big challenge. I mean, it's got to be part of the culture of a child growing up at home, not just in school. But it's a constant battle to reinforce these new behaviors. There'll be a whole generation of kids growing up with these new behaviors. It's just the ones that are kind of, remember what life was like before COVID, that's going to be the most challenge.
And I think my sense in one of the questions is, I know and I live in Rockville, Montgomery County, Maryland, and certainly a lot of discussion, I'm sure back and forth about whether teachers, it seems like they're, in public schools at least, they're being required to get the vaccine. Any insight onto that? And I guess that plays into the whole, the importance of the issue of the risk of transmission in a particular work environment. I guess my understanding, you'd really need to look at it on a case-by-case basis to make these decisions.
Yeah, I mean, it's really tough. I've never heard anyone at the CDC or other scientists state we're going to prevent COVID transmission unless we get, before vaccine. All we could hope to do was slow down the curve, because if this virus lives on, inanimate objects for a couple days, and you're not constantly washing your hands, and we're social beings, so whether we get together in big groups or small groups, we're even seeing small groups transmit the virus. And what we also found is 95% of people in healthy cohorts in some of our clinics had no symptoms at all and were shedding and passing on virus. So with that, there's no possibility of preventing transmission until we get to herd immunity and there's no further variant strains. So yeah, little Susie is going to bring it home to grandma and could, end up killing grandma. Our goal all along before vaccine was to make sure everyone who needed a ventilator had one. And now that we have a vaccine, do I think everyone should get it? Absolutely. I mean, if I would rather get a vaccine and deal with the unknown of long-term effects of that based on a relatively old technology in a new application than to deal with chronic heart, lung, kidney, issues. And we have family members of nurses who are now oxygen dependent when they weren't before. Even after the acute phase of COVID is over, they have now new chronic cardiac problems that's gonna shorten their life. They have acute kidney injury. I mean, it's a mess. I mean, what about the unknown of COVID? So I don't think you can mandate it right now. I don't think there's enough political backing and leadership backing to make it that, unless it gets to be like 1914 and we lose 10% of the world population versus 2%. So of those infected. In terms of my kindergarten friends, some of them that have high risk themselves get to work remotely. They met the CDC criteria to work remotely, and those that get the vaccine that don't have the same risk work on site. And now they have one of my friends got the vaccine because she hates working on remotely. She wants to work with the kids that give her a lot of pleasure and satisfaction. So she got the vaccine and went back to work to do on site. So, for all the reasons Anthony talked about, it's gonna create a lot of havoc and a lot of chaos if you decide to mandate the vaccine. Now, that said, in a nursing home where 50% of the population dies, how do you not mandate the vaccine? But again, the pressure of killing more people, or a higher percentage, will support making the vaccine, a mandate.
Yeah, and you can also ease into this, right? You can try carrots and sticks and see how it goes, right? I mean, and if you find, as we gear up for the second season of this, whenever that will happen, that your vaccination rates are low, right? Then maybe you decide to move. You consider mandating, but perhaps in this first season of this, you do everything you can, and you just put together very good tracking, so you understand how many of your employees have vaccinated. And if you're hitting that that herd immunity threshold, right? They're talking 85% now or whatever within your facility. I mean, maybe that's your internal. I mean, this is just me talking. This isn't CDC here, but maybe you have an internal benchmark that, in consultation with your employee health experts, you say, okay, we get 75% this year. That's satisfactory. As long as you're tracking that, you might be able to get there without taking the draconian step of mandating.
Yeah, and to your point, tracking is really important. Someone had asked about how do you track subcontractors. Well, we did at Bon Secours Mercy Hospital. We had to, any painter, any technician who walked into our hospitals had to have their flu vaccine, or they had to wear a mask. Now, tracking, right, depending on how many subcontractors you have, is very complex. And I'm happy to help out as a consultant to help you figure out how to track that. But that's going to take some FTE.
We've had about 3 other questions come in. I don't think we're going to be able to get to those. We've got about 4 minutes left. I'd like to end on this, and Liana and Anthony, both you may just want to address this quickly. So, in particular, outside the healthcare arena, because the health, hospitals and clinics and so on are probably much better prepared to deal with this issue than non-healthcare employers. If you're outside the healthcare arena, how do you get started on this issue? First steps, and then also what resources might you need, and then also record keeping. And any closing comments on that set of questions?
Well, Anthony talked about it a little bit beforehand, and that's get your policy and procedure, get it vetted by legal, assign HR to handle this, unless you have an employee wellness program that's robust with medical providers. I think it's going to land in the lap of HR, but you have to decide who's going to be in charge. And again, if your board of directors, your executive leaders aren't for this, or culture eats procedure for lunch. So I wouldn't even start unless your top tier leaders back this initiative.
I think the very first thing to do would be to make sure all of the key stakeholders are on board and that resources are being dedicated to it, right? And then at that point, you can go out and, hire someone like Liana to give you, several hours of advice on how to stand it up, and or someone like me to advise you on the legal side or whatever. But once the stakeholders are in and the resources are available, then, people are doing this. There's best practices out there. And, there's no need to start from scratch and reinvent the wheel. I think this is an area where getting some people who have done it before to consult is money well spent.
And for the 3 or so questions we didn't get to raise with you all and answer, for those who asked, I'm going to copy those, and I'll circulate those to Anthony and Liana, and one of us will get back to you with our thoughts on that answer, so it doesn't go unaddressed for you. Anthony, any closing comments? We're right down to a minute. I think this has been a really great, informative, and thought-provoking discussion.
No comments. Thanks for being here.
Thank you. Margie, thank you so much for hosting.
I want to thank Anthony and John and Liana for coming on today and presenting this very important topic to our members and people on this call. So thank you very much. We will share the slides and we are recording this webinar. It will be on the Chamber's website, as well as you can get a copy of it on rockvillechamber.org. And thank you, all of you, for your time and very informative webinar.
Thank you. Have a good day.